inspired you to take this closer look at guns and the role of race in the Second Amendment?
It was the killing of Philando Castile, who was a black man pulled over by the police who had a license to carry weapon, a legal weapon. And when he informed the police officer using the NRA guidelines, the police officer shot him dead. So here you have a black man killed for no other reason than he has a gun. Not that he's brandishing it, not that he's threatening anyone, but that he simply has the gun. And the NRA went virtually silent, which then caused journalists to ask, do African Americans have Second Amendment rights? And that question is what sent me on this hunt.
First, to answer your question, yes, blacks in America have Second Amendment rights, just as all Americans do, because they are American. Philando Castile did everything he was supposed to do and was shot unjustly. The NRA is not the arbiter of the Second Amendment. Secondly, that is one of the many examples as to why the NRA has lost a lot of memberships, and many in the 2A community do not support the NRA anymore. The NRA has a sordid past to include supporting gun control against blacks specifically, as well as supporting other types of gun control, and still do.
Explore the roots of the Second Amendment, which reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You argue that the amendment was born out of racism and fear of slave rebellions and was, quote, engineered to deny the rights of African Americans since its inception. How do you make that case?
I make that case by looking at what was happening in the crafting of the Constitution and in the ratification conventions, particularly the one in Virginia. So in the crafting of the U.S. Constitution, you had the power of the southern states weighing in, demanding protection of slavery in the U.S. Constitution as the payoff for them being willing to sign on to this thing called the United States of America, to end up with that Second Amendment. That really is an outlier when you look at the rest of those rights, where the right to not have right not to be illegally searched and seized, the right to a speedy and fair trial, the right to free speech, the right to freedom of the press. And then you've got this one about the right to a well-regulated militia for the security of the state.
For the security of a free state, not the security of the state. Seriously, the host just read it to you.
You also say, quote, there was an original purpose to the Second Amendment, but it wasn't to keep people safe. It was to preserve white supremacy and slavery. Briefly, Ellie, how do we know that to be the case for sure?
Yeah, so I'm coming up with that just because I'm reading Patrick Henry and George Mason, who was then governor of Virginia at the founding of the country. This is not my words. This is what those white guys said when they were debating the Second Amendment.
In a not so surprising revelation, the Second Amendment is a racist relic of slavery. And before the racists and trolls attack me with, it's about states' rights and stopping tyranny from the government, let's go further back in time to before the founding fathers or even a thought in their parents' minds. We're in the 1680s, several decades after enslaved people were first brought to the shores of the Americas. The Virginia General Assembly passed one of the first gun control laws in the colonies, making it illegal for any African American to carry a weapon or a weapon-like object.
Yes, this was gun control, and it was used against slaves and free blacks.
I just want you all to have context on how deep of a hold white supremacy has in this country to determine who could and couldn't have a gun. And to put it more simply, who was doing the killing and who was being killed. Let's go back to the 1700s. In the years that followed the decision to ratify the Second Amendment, gun prohibition laws targeting Black Americans began popping up all around the country. Honestly, the list was way too long to include in this video, but I'll drop a link in the comment section. Where I want to take us next is post-Civil War, specifically 2 years after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. Fear gripped white slave owners and racists, and so they began pushing for new laws dubbed the Black Codes that would prevent Black Americans from owning guns or joining militias on the basis that they were not citizens of the United States. This decision was set in precedence by the Supreme Court's ruling on the Dred Scott versus Sanford case of 1857, 6 years prior.
It's ironic that she hasn't noticed that her source is the racist origins of U.S. gun control. Gun control, which is the opposite of the Second Amendment.
I'm bringing this to your attention because the gun-toting right loves to scream, "Give me liberty or give me death," a famous quote by the aforementioned Patrick Henry at the Virginia Convention. But how can a law that was specifically meant to take away the liberty of Black Americans in this country be something to cheer about, unless that liberty is only meant for a specific group of people?
First of all, it's a right, not a law. Secondly, if it was intended to disarm black people, then why were states scrambling to make laws to disarm black people after the ratification of the Bill of Rights? Perhaps if you actually read the rest of Steve Ekwell's paper, you would have seen that. Or maybe you did, which is why you didn't link it in your video like you said you would.
How can this be fighting tyranny when it was used to oppress Black people? Here's my point. Many laws, legislation, and governmental practices have racist origins, including the filibuster that was used by racist Southern legislators to stop over 200 anti-lynching bills. Why do we continue to both sides this issue when the other side's legitimacy is based on racism?
If by the other side referring to the Democratic Party that started the KKK for the purpose of terrorizing black people, then passed gun control laws to disarm black people to make it safer for the KKK to terrorize them, who wrote all the Jim Crow laws and then wrote and signed off on the 1968 Gun Control Act that was purely intended to disarm black people when groups like the Black Panthers started taking up arms to protect their communities from racist mobs. That other side? If you would like to know more, I recommend reading The Racist Origins of U.S. Gun Control by Steve Ekwell and The Second Amendment Toward an Afro-Americanist Reconsideration by Robert Cottrell and Raymond Diamond. I will actually link them below. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe.